I still remember that night on Route 19 like it happened yesterday. The highway was empty. One of those stretches where you drive for miles without seeing another set of headlights. Just dark woods pressing against the sides of the road. The kind of darkness that feels alive, like it's breathing with you. It was close to 2 a.m. I'd been on shift for almost 10 hours already, running on stale coffee and muscle memory. You do enough midnight patrols and the world starts to feel a little unreal. Like you're the only one left awake, and everything out there is just shadows waiting to move. That's when I saw it. A car ahead of me, drifting slightly over the line, then snapping back. Not enough to call it reckless, but enough to get my attention. Late night weaving like that usually means a drunk driver, or someone too tired to realize they should have pulled over hours ago. Either way, my job was to stop them before they killed themselves or someone else. I hit the lights, and after a few seconds, the car slowed, tires crunching against the gravel shoulder. I pulled up behind it, my spotlight catching the dull silver paint of what looked like a beat-up sedan. Nothing unusual, just another stop on another long night. But the moment I stepped out of my cruiser, something felt off. I've done hundreds of traffic stops. You get a sense of people, whether they're nervous, angry, drunk, or hiding something. There's a rhythm to it. But as I walked toward that car, the air around me felt wrong, heavy, like the silence before a thunderstorm. My boots on the asphalt sounded too loud, too sharp. The driver's window stayed rolled up. Normally, folks crack it as soon as you approach, fumbling for their license or pretending they don't know why you pulled them over. But this guy, he just sat there. Engine running, tailpipe puffing faint clouds in the cold night air. I tapped the glass with my flashlight. No response. The man inside didn't even flinch. His hands were fixed on the steering wheel, locked at 10 and 2 like a picture in a driver's manual. His face was turned forward, lit pale by the dashboard glow. I knocked harder, leaned down so he could see my uniform, the badge, the whole thing. Still nothing. Finally, he turned his head, slowly, like it took effort. When our eyes met through the glass, my stomach dropped. It wasn't anything obvious. He didn't look dead or angry or drugged out. He looked normal enough, late 30s maybe, unshaven, tired. But there was something in his eyes. Something flat. Not even hostile, just empty, like he was staring through me instead of at me. I told him to roll the window down. My voice sounded too loud in that stillness. He didn't move. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but the glass stayed between us. The engine hummed, steady, the dashboard lights reflecting in his eyes. I repeated myself sharper this time. "Roll down your window, sir." That's when I felt it. Not from him, from the back seat. I don't know how to explain it. I hadn't looked back there yet, hadn't shown my flashlight past him, but I swear, as clear as I'm breathing right now, something was watching me from the darkness behind him. Every instinct in me screamed it. The tiny hairs on my neck stood up. I could almost feel its gaze pressing against my skin. I angled my light toward the rear seats. Empty. Just shadows, and the faint outline of worn upholstery. But the feeling didn't go away. It only grew stronger. The man's lips moved again, barely. His breath fogged the inside of the glass. I crouched down, trying to hear him. "Sir, can you roll your window?" That's when I realized he was whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but his mouth was shaping something over and over, soft and desperate. His hands were trembling against the wheel. I lowered my voice, tried to calm him. "Hey, you okay in there? You need medical attention?" His eyes darted toward the rearview mirror, quick, almost guilty, then snapped back to me. That weight in the back seat grew heavier. Not sound, not sight, just presence. Like someone crouched low, holding their breath, waiting for me to look away. I swallowed hard, straightened up, and radioed in the stop. My voice cracked in the middle, which never happens. I gave dispatch the plate number, the location. Standard procedure. But the whole time I kept my eyes on that back seat, expecting God I don't know what. A face to lean forward, a hand to press against the glass. Something. When I turned back, the man had pressed his forehead against the window. Hard. His breath fogged around it, smearing against the glass. His lips moved faster now, whispering like a prayer. His eyes were wide, wet, begging without sound. I knocked again, harder this time. My fist stung against the glass. "Open the window now!" He didn't. He just kept whispering. His eyes darted to the mirror again, then back at me, and in that moment, I knew. He wasn't refusing me. He wasn't being difficult. He was terrified. Not of me, of whatever was sitting in that back seat. I shone my light again. Nothing. Just shadows. But I could feel it pressing closer, almost brushing against me. A presence, thick and cold, filling the air around us. I wanted to open the door, drag him out, do something, anything, but my hand wouldn't move. My whole body locked up. Like if I broke that invisible line, whatever was back there would finally show itself. For a long moment, it was just me, the man, and that unseen watcher behind him. The highway stretched out silent and endless around us. My cruiser's lights flashed red and blue across the trees, throwing broken colors over his pale face. Then, just as sudden as it started, he leaned back. Slowly, he let go of the wheel. His lips stopped moving. His hands dropped into his lap, limp. He turned his head toward the back seat. Not quick, deliberate. Like he was acknowledging something. Then he closed his eyes. I stood there, frozen, my hand hovering inches from my holster, sweat prickling down my spine even in the cold. I don't remember walking back to my cruiser, but somehow I did. My legs felt numb, like they belonged to someone else. I radioed in again, trying to sound normal, but my voice shook. I told dispatch I needed backup. When I glanced in my side mirror, I saw him still sitting there. Still. Head tilted toward the darkness behind him. Like he was listening. Like he wasn't alone. That's how the stop ended. No sudden outburst, no violence. Just silence and that unbearable feeling of being watched. I stayed in my cruiser with my spotlight on his car until another unit arrived. But when we approached together, the sedan was empty, engine still running, driver's door locked, keys gone. The man had vanished, and in the frost on the inside of the rear window, I swear to God I saw the shape of a handprint, not his size, smaller, child-sized, pressed from the inside. I never found out what really happened on Route 19 that night. But I can tell you this much, whatever was in that back seat didn't want to be seen. And I thank God every day I didn't open that door. People always ask me why I stayed in law enforcement for as long as I did. Nights like that one are the reason I almost didn't. I barely slept after Route 19. Even when I closed my eyes, I'd see him, sitting rigid behind that glass, whispering at nothing, staring into the rear view like he was trapped with something I couldn't see. And that handprint pressed inside the frost. No amount of paperwork or procedure could explain it away, but the thing about this job is, you don't get to stop. You go right back out there, even if every part of you is screaming to stay away. And sure enough, just 3 nights later, I found myself back on Route 19. It wasn't by choice. It was my patrol zone, same as always. The stretch of road that officers joked was cursed. I used to laugh at that. Not anymore. I saw the same car before I even realized it. Same beat-up silver sedan, same dented bumper, weaving just enough to draw me in. My stomach turned cold. For a second, I thought maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe fatigue was catching up with me. But when I called in the plate, dispatch confirmed it. Same registration, same owner, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I hit the lights. The sedan pulled over almost immediately like it was waiting for me. The engine idled, faint plumes curling into the night air. My spotlight cut across the back window, lighting the empty seats. No movement, no shadows. Still, I felt it. That same pressure, like eyes digging into me. I told myself I had backup only a few minutes away. Told myself I was in control. Then I stepped out of the cruiser and walked toward the car. When I reached the driver's side, I already knew. The window was still up, and the man was still there. Hands on the wheel. Head forward, skin pale in the glow of the dashboard. I tapped the glass. No response. I leaned down, trying to make eye contact. And for the first time, I saw his face clearly. At first, I thought something was wrong with my vision. The reflection of my flashlight, maybe. But no, I was close enough to see it wasn't a trick of the light. His eyes were black. Not like dark brown, not like pupils blown wide in the night. No, they were solid. glossy, inky black from corner to corner, swallowing the whites entirely, like someone had taken 2 pools of tar and pressed them into his skull. My throat went dry. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then finally he lifted his hand, slow, deliberate, and pressed it against the glass. It was trembling, shaking hard enough that I could see his knuckles twitch. His lips parted, and this time I heard him. Not me. The words fogged against the glass, muffled but clear enough. I frowned, leaned closer. "What did you say?" He pressed his forehead to the window just like before. His black eyes locked on mine. His voice rose, strained, desperate. "Not me. He's here, in the back. You have to see him?" Every nerve in my body rebelled at those words. I swung my flashlight toward the rear seat. The beam cut through the dark, revealing nothing but torn fabric and a fast food bag crumpled on the floor. Empty. But the man shook his head violently, banging his palm against the glass. His mouth moved fast now, the words spilling out between gasps. "He won't show you. He hides. He hides when you look. Don't you feel him? Don't you see him?" My grip tightened on the flashlight. And God help me, I did feel it. That pressure. That awful heaviness, like being underwater, chest squeezed tight, lungs starving for air. Something was there. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but it was there. I could feel its attention shifting between us like a weight sliding across the room. I backed up, heart slamming in my chest. My radio crackled on my shoulder, but I barely heard it. My eyes darted from the man to the empty back seat, back and forth, trying to find something that wasn't there. The man started to cry. Tears streaked down his cheeks, leaving trails in the condensation. His whisper turned frantic. "Please, please make him leave." "He won't leave." "He's in the car." "He won't leave me." I tried to stay calm, tried to fall back on training. "Sir, unlock your door. Step out slowly. We'll figure this out." He shook his head so hard it rattled against the glass. His black eyes darted back to the mirror. His voice dropped low, barely audible. "He said if I move, if I leave, he'll come with me." A chill raced up my spine. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't refusing to cooperate. He wasn't crazy. He was trapped. Trapped with something I couldn't see. The radio squawked again, my backup unit checking in. I told them my location, my voice cracking. I tried to sound steady, but I was seconds from breaking. When I looked back, the man had pulled his hand from the glass. Slowly, he pointed toward the back seat. And for a split second, I swear on my life, I saw it. Not fully, not clearly, just a ripple, like heat rising from asphalt. A distortion in the air, bending the light wrong. And in that ripple, the faint suggestion of a face. Small, childlike, eyes too wide, watching. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking in my grip. When I looked again, it was gone. Just shadows. But the man's face was twisted in terror, his black eyes wide and wet. His lips moved against the glass, forming a single word. "See?" By the time backup arrived, I was standing frozen, drenched in sweat despite the cold. The other trooper, a younger guy, walked right up to the car without hesitation. He knocked on the glass, barked orders, threatened to break the window. The man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. His eyes were closed, his hands limp in his lap. Just like last time, and the back seat, empty. We ended up towing the sedan. When they searched it later, there was nothing unusual. No drugs, no weapons, no evidence of anyone else. Just an abandoned car registered to a man who hadn't been seen in months. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt pressing against me that night. And I know those eyes, black, endless, empty, weren't human anymore. The rookie laughed it off. Called it exhaustion, stress, too many night shifts. He doesn't patrol anymore. Transferred out after 6 months. Me? I stayed. But I never drove Route 19 the same way again. Every mile felt like that back seat was behind me, following, waiting for me to look away long enough for it to climb inside. And sometimes, when the cruiser is quiet and the night is still, I swear I can still feel him. Not the driver, the one in the back. When you've worn the uniform long enough, you learn that most cases leave some kind of paper trail, even the strange ones. Someone files a report, someone makes a call, and you can at least point to evidence, but not this one. The silver sedan sat in impound for weeks. No one came for it. No one claimed it. When we pulled the registration, it went back to an address 3 counties over. We checked. Empty house. Mail stacked knee-high. Neighbors said the man who lived there hadn't been seen in almost a year. There was no missing person report. No relatives we could find. Just a name on a deed, tied to a car that shouldn't have been on Route 19 anymore. I should have let it go. Told myself it was above my pay grade. But something about that night wouldn't leave me alone. The look in his eyes. That ripple in the back seat. The way he whispered, begging me to see what he saw. It gnawed at me, kept me awake. So one night after shift, I drove out to the impound lot. It was late, nearly midnight, the chain-link fence rattling in the wind. Rows of dead cars stretched out under the floodlights. Some smashed from accidents, some rusting from time. All of them forgotten. The sedan was parked near the far end. Isolated, like even the other wrecks didn't want it nearby. I told myself I was just checking, just confirming details for my report. But the truth is, I was drawn to it, like unfinished business pulling me back. The moment I opened the driver's door, the smell hit me. Not rot exactly, but something stale, heavy, like the air inside had been sealed for years. The seat was adjusted for someone taller than me. The dashboard still littered with old receipts, a broken phone charger. Everything normal, but the back seat, even empty, it radiated that same pressure. That same heavy silence that made the skin on my arms prickle. I ran my flashlight across the torn upholstery, half expecting to catch a glimpse of that ripple again. Nothing. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all. That fatigue had twisted my brain into shadows. And then I opened the trunk. At first glance, it looked empty. Just a few scraps of cloth, a rusty tire iron, dust coating the inside. I was about to shut it when I noticed something on the lid. Handprints, pressed deep into the lining. I froze. My light shook in my hand as I leaned closer. They weren't normal prints. Not from an adult. They were small, child-sized, maybe the size of a 6 or 7-year-old. Each finger perfectly outlined in the fabric, as if someone had been pounding, clawing, desperate to get out. And they weren't old. The impressions were clear, fresh. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the light. My stomach twisted. I told myself maybe kids had been playing around the car before it was impounded. Maybe. But I knew that wasn't true. These prints weren't on the outside. They were on the inside of the trunk lid. Someone, or something, had been in there. My chest felt tight. Every instinct screamed at me to slam the trunk shut and never come back. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring, my pulse thundering in my ears. Then, faint as a whisper, I swore I heard it, a tap, from inside. I staggered back, hand flying to my holster. My breath came fast, ragged, clouding in the cold air. I aimed my light again, searching every corner of that trunk. Empty, just shadows. But the sound lingered in my head, as clear as if I'd heard it for real. A knuckle rapping. A child's knuckle. I slammed the trunk shut. The metallic echo rang through the lot, bouncing between rows of cars until it faded into silence. I stood there for a long time, gripping the handle, half expecting it to lift on its own. But nothing happened. Just stillness. Just my own ragged breathing. That night I drove home in silence. The road blurred beneath me, but I couldn't stop picturing those handprints. Tiny palms, clawing, trapped in the dark. After that, things changed for me. Every patrol shift felt heavier. Every routine stop made my nerves scream. I started seeing things in my mirrors, just flickers, like someone sitting in the back of my cruiser. I'd whip around, light shining across the empty seat, but the feeling never left. It got worse with time. Once, while writing up a report in the station parking lot, I glanced into my rear view. For just a second, I thought I saw a small face staring back. Round, pale, eyes too wide. By the time I turned, nothing was there. Just the empty seat and the faint reflection of myself. Sleep didn't help either. Dreams of being locked in that trunk, pounding against the lid, screaming with no sound. Waking with my hands aching as if I'd been clawing all night. I tried to tell myself it was stress, trauma. Maybe it was. But deep down I knew the truth. That driver hadn't been lying. There really was someone else in that car, not someone living. Not anymore. The impound lot eventually auctioned the sedan off. Some junkyard picked it up, stripped it for parts. At least that's what they told us. But I never believed it was gone. How do you destroy something that isn't made of metal or glass? How do you get rid of something that hides in the dark, waiting for a ride? You don't. It moves on, finds another seat, another set of eyes to watch from the shadows. Sometimes, when I'm on patrol and the road goes dead quiet, I catch myself glancing into the rear view. My chest tightens, waiting to see him or it sitting back there. A passenger I never asked for. A passenger that never leaves, and once I swear I saw it, driving down Route 19 again, past the spot where I stopped that sedan. The night was heavy, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own blood pumping. I flicked my eyes up to the mirror, and there it was, clear as day. A small hand pressed flat against the inside of the rear window. I slammed the brakes, whipped around, but the seat was empty. No handprint, no face. Just me. Just me and the endless road. But even now, years later, I still wake some nights with that image burned into me. That hand. Tiny, pale, reaching out from the dark. And I know, deep down, that the passenger I found in that trunk never stopped riding along. He's still out there, waiting. I've always told people that the highway at night has a way of swallowing things. Headlights can only reach so far, and the rest of the world disappears into black. I've driven through storms, through fog thick as milk, through stretches of desert where you could go 100 miles without seeing another living soul. But nothing ever sat heavier in my chest than what happened on Route 12 near mile marker 77. That night was like any other patrol. My shift started at dusk, and by the time the sun went down, the highway had already emptied out. I didn't mind the quiet. Most nights, it gave me time to breathe, time to just think. The cruiser hummed beneath me, radio static filling the silence between dispatch calls. I'd just passed a closed rest stop when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder. Pale under the glow of my headlights, one arm lifted stiffly as if she wasn't even sure how to wave someone down. Her hair was long, maybe dark brown, though in that light it could have been anything. She wore a faded jacket that looked too thin for the cold, and a skirt that whipped against her knees in the wind. Now, highway patrol training tells you to be careful with hitchhikers. 9 times out of 10, it's harmless. A stranded motorist, someone out of gas. But there's always that chance the situation is wrong. Still, I slowed down. Something about her didn't let me just keep driving. I rolled down the passenger window a crack. "You all right, ma'am?" I called. Her head turned slowly toward me, and for a second I thought she hadn't heard. Then she stepped closer to the cruiser, her hands trembling against the cold. "My car broke down," she said, her voice soft, almost hoarse. "I just need a ride to the next town." I glanced at the road stretching out ahead of us. The next town was barely 10 miles away. Normally, I'd call in a tow or offer to radio someone for her, but there was no car in sight. Just her, no hazard lights. "No stranded vehicle pulled off the shoulder? Where's your car?" I asked. Her lips pressed together like she was struggling to remember. Then she whispered, "Back there," and gestured vaguely down the dark stretch of highway. I hesitated, but the night air had already crept into the cruiser, and I could see her shivering. Against my better judgment, I reached over and unlocked the door. "Hop in. I'll get you to town." She slid into the passenger seat without another word, pulling the door shut behind her. I expected the usual flood of relief. Most people stranded on the road start talking right away, thanking you, telling you their story. She didn't. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the windshield like the darkness outside might start moving if she stared long enough. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the tires humming on the asphalt and the faint crackle of dispatch on the radio. I cleared my throat. "What's your name?" Her voice came low, so low I almost didn't catch it. "Anna." "All right, Anna. I'll get you into Dry Creek. You got someone there who can help?" She nodded once but didn't turn her head. Her face was still pointed forward, pale in the glow of the dash lights. I watched her from the corner of my eye, uneasy. 5 minutes later, I reached for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Got a female passenger at mile marker 77. Says her vehicle broke down. I'm transporting her into Dry Creek. You got a record of any calls out this way tonight? There was a pause, some static, then dispatch came back. Negative Unit 12. No calls logged. Did you say 77? That's right. Another pause. Longer this time. When dispatch spoke again, her tone had changed. Unit 12, be advised. Route 12 beyond marker 76 is closed. Has been for 3 years now. Rockslide washed it out. Nobody should be on that stretch. I felt a chill crawl up the back of my neck. I glanced at Anna, but she didn't move. She didn't even blink. I pressed the radio again. Dispatch, say again. I just picked up a hitchhiker at 77. Static hissed in my ear. Then, copy Unit 12. Are you certain of your location? I slowed the cruiser, squinting at the mile markers as they slid past in the headlights. 75, 76, and there. Behind me, I knew I'd seen 77 clear as day. 10-4, I said into the radio. I'm certain. Anna finally turned her head then. Her eyes met mine, calm, almost empty, and she gave the faintest smile. Don't worry, she whispered. We're almost there. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Almost where? I looked back to the road. Something felt wrong. The asphalt looked the same, but the signs, the markers, they'd stopped coming. It was just endless highway, unbroken, stretching into black. Anna, I said carefully, my throat dry, where exactly do you live in Dry Creek? She tilted her head as if she had to think about it. Then, so softly I barely heard her. I used to live there. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing my voice steady. Used to? She didn't answer. She just turned back toward the windshield, her reflection pale and hollow in the glass. The radio crackled suddenly, startling me. Unit 12, do you copy? Dispatch's voice was sharp now, urgent. We're not reading your location anymore. Your transponder just dropped off. I fumbled for the mic. I copy. Still on Route 12, headed toward Dry Creek with passenger. Static swallowed the reply. Anna shifted slightly in her seat, her hands folding tighter in her lap. Her nails looked dark, like they'd been broken, maybe dirt caked beneath them. My stomach twisted again. Something inside me said to stop the cruiser, to let her out, turn around, get back to where the road still made sense. But when I glanced at her again, she was staring at me, smiling faintly like she knew exactly what I was thinking. Don't leave me out here, she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it cut sharper than any scream. I didn't stop. I kept driving, even though the road ahead didn't look familiar anymore. Even though my headlights seemed weaker, the dark swallowing more and more of the world around us. At some point, the mile markers were gone completely. No signs, no exits, no towns. Just black highway stretching on forever, and Anna sitting silently beside me as if she'd always been there. I kept driving, even though the highway no longer made sense. It felt endless, looping through the same stretch of black, but eventually, lights appeared. Faint at first, then stronger. A gas station sitting alone on the roadside. The fluorescent glow looked like salvation after miles of nothing. Anna finally spoke. This will do, she said softly, her hand resting lightly against the glass. I slowed, pulling the cruiser into the cracked lot. The pumps looked old, rust streaked down the metal. The sign above flickered like it hadn't had a full charge in years. No other cars. No attendant visible. This isn't Dry Creek, I muttered, scanning the place. It's close enough, she whispered, opening her door before I'd even stopped the car completely. The air was cold when she stepped out, her skirt shifting against the wind. She turned back just once, meeting my eyes. There was no thank you, no explanation, just that faint smile again. Then she walked across the lot, her figure fading beneath the buzzing lights. I wanted to call out, to stop her, but my throat closed, like some part of me knew this was how it had to end. By the time I pulled out of the station, she was gone from my mirrors. No trace. The drive back was quiet. Too quiet. The radio was dead now, just a hiss of static no matter what channel I switched to. And though I retraced every mile, the signs came back, the markers lined up, 75, 76, but not 77. Like it had never existed. When I finally made it back to the station, I wrote up my report. I kept it clinical. Unidentified female hitchhiker. Picked up at mile 77. Dropped at fuel station near Route 12 junction. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. Just facts. That's how I survived this job. Keep it factual. Keep it neat. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I typed. Later, when the shift ended and the lot emptied out, I sat alone in the cruiser. I told myself I'd just clear the dash cam, wipe the tape. No sense cluttering it with rides that didn't matter. Still, something inside me said to check it first. I played the recording back from the moment I'd stopped on the shoulder. The headlights washed over empty asphalt. Then the passenger door opened, on its own, and shut again. I froze. My breath hitched as the feed kept playing. The cruiser pulled forward, back onto the highway, just like I remembered. The camera picked up the glow of the dashboard, the wheel in my hands, my own face reflected faintly in the window, but the passenger seat was empty. Not just empty once or twice, empty the entire ride. From the shoulder, to the stretch of highway, to the gas station, nothing. No Anna. No figure sitting quietly at my side. I leaned closer to the screen, my pulse thundering in my ears. I remembered her voice. Her hands folded in her lap. The faint smile when she whispered not to leave her out there. I remembered every second, but the tape showed nothing. At the gas station, the door swung open again on its own. The seatbelt moved, like something unseen slipped free. Then the door closed. The cruiser idled a moment, and I saw myself staring into the glow of the station lights. Then I pulled out. Alone. I let the recording play until the screen went black. Then I sat there in silence, my reflection staring back at me in the dark glass. Somewhere deep down, I knew I shouldn't tell anyone. They'd think I'd lost it, that I'd been driving too long seeing things. But it hadn't been imagination. I could still feel the indentation on the passenger seat. I could still hear her whisper in my ear. I turned the key, letting the cruiser hum back to life. My eyes slid to the empty seat beside me. Empty. But I didn't feel alone. Not anymore. It started the way these things always do. Quiet. Too quiet. I was running a late shift on Highway 64, out past the marshland where the air smells like wet earth and the road seems to stretch forever. No cars, no trucks, not even the usual 18-wheelers that crawl along at night. Just me and the hum of the engine. The radio was my only company, dispatch checking in every half hour. Static, chatter, the occasional call about deer on the shoulder. Routine. Then it cut out. Not suddenly. Not with a pop or crack. Just faded. The woman's voice on the line stretched thin and warped, like a tape, dragging too slow. Then nothing. I tapped the mic. Unit 12 to dispatch, copy? Silence. I tried again. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Do you read? Only static. I adjusted the dial, switched channels, ran through every frequency I had. All the same, white noise like the whole world had gone underwater. Now radios die sometimes. I've had interference before, dead spots in the hills, but this stretch of highway was flat. Nothing around but low trees and swamp. I slowed the cruiser, uneasy. That's when I saw it, a car, maybe 100 yards ahead, parked at an angle off the shoulder, headlights off, shape just barely visible in the moonlight. At first I thought it was a civilian, someone broken down, maybe asleep at the wheel, but as I got closer I recognized the silhouette. The light bar on the roof, the markings on the side. It was another patrol car. I felt relief for a moment, thinking maybe another unit had stopped to check something out. But then dispatch's words echoed in my head. Only 3 units on duty tonight. I was one. The others were covering the interstate. Nobody else had been assigned to this stretch. I slowed, headlights washing over the back of the car. My chest tightened. The license number was half-caked with mud, but the paint was the same, the decals identical to mine. It was one of ours, but the engine wasn't running. No lights, no movement, just sitting there. I eased onto the shoulder behind it, tires crunching gravel. My hand hovered near the mic, even though it was useless. Out of habit, I whispered into it anyway. Dispatch, I've got a unit parked off Route 64. Near mile marker 112, no response, investigating. Only static came back. I stepped out. The night air damp and cool, crickets buzzing low in the brush. The cruiser ahead looked wrong. Dusty like it hadn't moved in weeks. The glass was streaked, grime clouding the windshield. But it hadn't been there before. I'd driven this stretch 2 hours earlier. The shoulder had been empty. My boots crunched gravel as I moved closer, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The windows were tinted, but I leaned in anyway, pressing a hand to the glass. The inside was empty. No gear, no paperwork on the dash, no faint glow of electronics. Just black seats, shadows, silence. Something about the air around it felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I circled to the driver's side. The door was shut, but when I tried the handle, it opened. No resistance. The smell hit first. Not rot, not blood, just old, stale, like a room sealed for years. I swept the light across the interior. No radio, no laptop, no logbook. Everything stripped. Even the VN plate on the dash was missing, like someone had carefully peeled it away. It didn't make sense. I pulled back, heart thudding, and looked at the roof. The light bar was cracked. The paint on the hood bubbled with rust. This wasn't a unit on patrol. This thing had been sitting here a long time. But then, why hadn't I seen it earlier? The trees shifted in the wind, their shadows bending across the hood like black fingers. I shut the door carefully and backed away. My cruiser's headlights spilled long across the road, pale and lonely. I wanted to get inside, call it in when I got back to town, forget the whole thing. But when I turned, I froze. Through the windshield of the strange cruiser, for just a second, I swore I saw movement. A figure sitting behind the wheel. Not clearly, just the shape of a head, the angle of shoulders. Watching me. I blinked, heart hammering, and it was gone. The seat was empty again. My throat tightened. I muttered under my breath, "Nope," and walked fast back to my car, every instinct screaming not to look back. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and gripped the wheel. My headlights caught the other cruiser in the mirror. Still there. Still dead. I tried the radio again, even though I knew. "Dispatch Unit 12. I need confirmation. Is any other unit logged on Highway 64? Static." I switched channels. Nothing. The silence pressed against me, heavier now. The other cruiser sat unmoving, its windows black, reflecting nothing at all. I put the car in gear. My hands shook as I pulled back onto the highway. I told myself I'd file it later, report it clean, let someone else figure it out. But even as the distance grew, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being followed. Every so often, I checked the mirror, half expecting to see headlights blooming behind me. But the road stayed empty, and yet in the hum of the tires, in the dead air of the radio, I kept hearing it. A faint low hiss, like a voice just out of range, calling my unit number. I tried to leave it behind me. I told myself I'd just keep driving, let the miles pile up until the memory thinned out. That's what you do out here, you keep moving. The highway eats what you don't look at. But the thought kept clawing back. That cruiser, empty, stripped, sitting in the dark like a carcass left to rot. I couldn't shake it. I lasted maybe 10 miles before I slowed, cursed under my breath, and swung the wheel in a hard turn. The tires groaned, the cruiser fishtailed, and I aimed back down the same stretch I'd just sworn to escape. The night air pressed thick against the windows. My headlights painted the asphalt in narrow lines of white. I told myself I needed proof, needed to be sure it wasn't my mind slipping. Because if I wrote it up without something solid, they'd think I'd cracked. And maybe I had. When I reached the mile marker again, I killed the siren, eased off the gas. The cruiser was still there, squatting on the shoulder, its paint dull and sickly under my lights. I parked behind it again. This time I left the engine running. My boots hit gravel, crunching loud in the silence. The swamp was quiet now. No crickets, no wind through the brush. Just me and the machine in front of me. It looked worse the second time. Rust spreading like disease across the hood, streaks of grime down the doors. My light swept the decal on the side. The letters were the same. County crest, badge number, everything. That number made my stomach knot. It was mine. The exact same unit number painted in block white across the fender. I stared, waiting for my brain to tell me I was wrong, that the grime or shadows had tricked my eyes. But the more I looked, the more my skin crawled. I moved to the back, light shaking in my hand. The license plate was the same, too. Same digits, same letters. My cruiser's plate, duplicated on this husk. I should have left then. Should have walked back, driven off, and never looked behind me. But something dragged me closer, step by step, like the car itself was pulling me in. I yanked the driver's side door. It opened again with a groan. The smell hit me sharper this time. Stale air, like wet fabric sealed for too long. I climbed halfway in, flashlight trembling across the interior, and my stomach turned. Everything was there. Not stripped, not empty. My radio bolted to the dash. My logbook, sitting in the passenger seat, bent open on the same page I'd filled earlier that night. My half-empty coffee cup in the holder, the ring of dried liquid on the rim. I leaned closer, light catching the little details. The scuff mark on the wheel where my ring had scratched. The rip in the fabric where my holster pressed against the seat. Every mark, every stain, every piece of trash, I knew them. Because they were mine. It wasn't just another cruiser. It was my cruiser. I staggered back, hit the doorframe, and stumbled onto the gravel. My own headlights glared at me from behind, burning into my eyes. For a 6 second, I couldn't tell which car was mine, which car I'd driven here. I turned, heart pounding, staring at my cruiser. The engine still hummed. The dash still glowed. It was real. I was sure it was real. But when I looked back at the other, my knees almost buckled. The dash lights were on now. The glow lit up the wheel, the radio, the empty seat. I hadn't touched the ignition. The keys weren't in it, but the hum was there, faint but steady, filling the night like a second heartbeat. I backed away, every nerve screaming. My boot caught a rut in the gravel, and I almost fell, but I kept moving until I reached my door. I yanked it open, slammed inside, and locked the doors. Through the windshield, I watched the twin cruiser. The glow inside flickered, brighter, dimmer, like it was breathing. My hands fumbled the radio again. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Do you copy?" Nothing. Static hissed back at me, loud, sharp, and then something else. Through the noise, a voice bled. Faint, warped. My own voice. "Unit 12, do you copy?" I dropped the mic like it burned me. The sound kept going, crawling out of the speakers, my own words thrown back at me. The same tone, the same stutter, like an echo from somewhere I hadn't been yet. The dashcam light blinked red. Recording. I turned, and for a second, I almost ripped the cord out. But I didn't, because some part of me needed to know. Needed to see if the tape would show me what my eyes couldn't trust. The other cruiser sat still now. No glow, no hum. Just a dead machine with my number stamped across it. I gripped the wheel, sweat soaking the back of my neck, and pulled out fast. The gravel sprayed behind me. As the road swallowed it in the mirrors, I told myself I'd never come back. Not for a report, not for proof, not for anything, but the silence inside the car was worse than anything. Waiting on that shoulder, because I couldn't stop staring at the dash. My coffee cup wasn't in the holder anymore. I thought I'd left it behind. I drove until the road blurred, until my eyes burned, until the hum of the tires grew louder than my thoughts. But no matter how far I pushed, the image followed me. The other cruiser, the duplicate of my life, sitting out there in the dark. I told myself I wouldn't stop again. Not for anything. Not until I saw the lights of town. Proof that the world was still normal, still real. But the night had other plans. It started with the glass. The first time, I didn't even notice. Just a flicker in the corner of my eye when I checked the side mirror. Something off. A shadow too sharp. A shape that didn't belong. I shook it off, blinked hard, kept driving. Then I looked again, and I froze. Because it wasn't me staring back. The face was mine. Sure, the same jawline, the same tired eyes, the same uniform collar rising around the neck. But the expression was wrong. He was smiling. Not wide, not cartoonish. Just a thin, steady curl at the corner of the mouth like he knew something I didn't. Like he was waiting. I jerked the wheel, nearly sending the car into the shoulder. My chest thudded. I blinked hard and looked again. The mirror showed me what it always had. My face, pale and sweating, mouth tight with fear. No smile, no trick. I laughed once, short and sharp. Told myself I'd imagined it, the way you see shapes in fog when you've been awake too long. But deep down, I knew. That wasn't the last time. Every glance brought it back. Not always the same. Sometimes the grin was wider, showing teeth. Sometimes the head tilted just slightly, like it was studying me. Once, the eyes didn't blink when mine did. By then, I couldn't convince myself it was exhaustion. I knew I should pull over, splash water on my face, call someone, anyone. But the thought of stopping, of sitting still in the dark, was worse than anything waiting in the glass. So I drove on, and then the road pulled me back. I don't even remember turning. 1 second, the lines were stretching out in front of me. The next, my headlights swung across the same swamp shoulder where it had all started. The cruiser was there again, waiting. My throat tightened. My hands locked around the wheel. I begged myself to keep driving, to let it rot there without me. But my foot pressed the brake. I rolled to a stop, headlights cutting across the husk of metal. It looked different now, cleaner. The rust streaks I'd seen before had faded, washed away. The windows glinted under the light, black and perfect, like polished stone. Something tugged at me again, pulled me out of my seat before I could argue. The air was colder this time. My breath came out in sharp puffs, fogging in the beam of the light. I circled the car slowly. Gravel shifted under my boots, crunching loud enough to echo. When I reached the driver's side window, I lifted the flashlight, hands trembling, and I stopped breathing. Because I was there, sitting inside, not just the uniform, not just the shape. It was me, every detail, every flaw. The crease in my brow, the scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike at 12. Even the way I tapped my thumb against the wheel when I was nervous. Only, I wasn't nervous. The version in the car was calm, too calm. He sat perfectly still, hands resting easy on the wheel, posture straight. And that smile, thin, sharp, curled across his face like it had been carved there. I staggered back, heart slamming against my ribs. The beam of my light quivered across the glass, but the other me didn't move, didn't blink. Just sat there watching me with eyes that seemed darker than mine, deeper, as if they weren't reflecting light at all but swallowing it whole. I whispered something. Maybe, "What are you?" or maybe just "no." My own voice sounded small, like a child's. The smile twitched wider, just enough for me to see teeth. I spun away, chest heaving, and nearly tripped over my own boots. My cruiser sat behind me, headlights still burning. The engine hummed steady. A lifeline in the quiet. I sprinted back, yanked the door, and shoved myself inside. But when I looked through the windshield, my breath caught again. The other car's headlights were on now, blazing bright. And through the glare, I saw him still, me, sitting there in the driver's seat, smiling. I turned the key hard, engine roaring higher, and slammed the gear into drive. Gravel spit under the tires as I tore away, the steering wheel shaking in my hands. The mirrors screamed at me. Every glance, every flick of my eyes, he was still there, my reflection grinning back. Even when the road was empty, even when no car followed, the glass showed him, closer, clearer, sharper. I stopped looking. I fixed my eyes forward, locked on the strip of road ahead, and didn't move them again. But I could still feel him, watching, waiting. Like sooner or later, the glass would win, and I wouldn't be the one behind the wheel anymore. Dawn came slow, like the sun didn't want to rise over that stretch of road. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on your shoulders. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned. My knuckles were stiff from clutching the wheel too tight. And then, just as the light broke, the radio cracked back to life. Not a voice, at first, just static. A soft hiss, like breath against my ear. Then dispatch cut through sharp and clear as if nothing had ever been wrong. Unit 7, status check. I nearly dropped the mic. My throat was so dry I could barely get the words out. Dispatch! This is Unit 7. I'm here. The silence after was worse than the static. I waited for laughter, for someone to say they were messing with me, that I'd been chasing my own tail all night. But all I heard was the flat tone of routine. Copy that, 7. Return to station. Shift log shows you're already off duty. I frowned, gripping the mic tighter. What do you mean? I'm still out here. I never checked out. Another pause. Papers shuffled on the other end, faint and distant. Then the voice returned. Negative. Your shift ended at 0300 hours. Log signed by Officer Reynolds. My blood ran cold. That was me. That was my name. I checked the clock on the dash. 6:41. Which meant if the log was right, I'd been driving 3 hours past the end of my shift. 3 hours I couldn't account for. I pressed the mic again, my voice shaking. Dispatch confirmed the signature. Who signed me out? Officer Reynolds. The words landed like a weight in my chest. I knew my own handwriting. Every officer does. We sign enough reports, enough tickets, enough warnings, it becomes second nature. If that log had my name on it, it wasn't forged. It wasn't copied, it was me. Only I hadn't done it. I felt sick. The longer I sat there, the more the cruiser felt wrong, like I was inside the wrong life. I flipped through the logbook I kept in the seat pocket, thumbing past pages of my own notes. Traffic stops, plate numbers, routine scribbles. But the last entry was dated 3:07 a.m. It listed my name, my badge number, a note, end of shift. Only I didn't write it, I knew because the pen stroke slanted different. Too neat, too smooth. I don't write like that. My hand shakes, especially late at night. But this signature was steady, confident, like someone was better at being me than I was. I slammed the book shut and tossed it onto the passenger seat. My chest was heaving now, every breath sharp and shallow. The road behind me was empty. The road ahead stretched on forever. I should have gone back right then, driven straight to the station, stormed inside, shoved the log in their faces and demanded answers. But I didn't, because some part of me was afraid of what I'd find. The station, the officers, the familiar walls, they felt less like a home base now and more like a mirror I didn't want to look into. What if I walked inside and they told me I'd already been there? That I'd already spoken to them? That I'd already gone home? What if the life I thought I was living wasn't mine anymore? I drove instead, aimless. The radio buzzed with traffic, with voices that sounded normal, steady, alive, but none of them felt real to me. I didn't call in again. I didn't answer when they checked. I just kept driving. The sun climbed higher, cutting across the windshield. My reflection stared back at me, pale and hollow-eyed, lips pressed tight. I tried not to blink, tried not to see if it smiled when I didn't. But even in the daylight, the glass had a weight to it. At one stop, I caught myself reaching up, touching the corner of the mirror like I was testing whether it was solid. My hand shook against the glass. For a second, I swore the skin that pressed back wasn't mine. I pulled away quick, heart hammering. By the time I rolled back into town, I didn't feel like an officer anymore. I felt like a shadow wearing a badge. The station lot was full when I parked. Morning shift, familiar cars, familiar faces. Everything should have felt normal, but when I walked inside, every head turned too fast. Eyes lingered a little too long, like they'd been expecting me. I went straight to the duty board, pretending I didn't notice. My name was there, and next to it, already signed off. 3 hours Reynolds. The letters curved neat and sharp, identical to the ones in my logbook. I touched the paper with the tip of my finger. Cold ran down my spine. Someone had lived those hours for me. Someone had worn my skin, signed my name, walked out of here like I'd never existed. And maybe the worst part wasn't that they'd done it. It was that no one questioned it. Not dispatch. Not the sergeant behind the desk. Not the officers who nodded when they passed me in the hall. They all accepted it. Like maybe they couldn't tell the difference, or maybe they could, and they just didn't care. That thought sat with me the rest of the day, heavy and unshakable. I stayed quiet. I didn't ask. I didn't confront anyone. I filled out my reports, sat through the morning briefing, went through the motions, but inside I was unraveling. Because if someone else could sign my name, wear my face, drive my car, then what proof did I have that I was still me? What if tomorrow came and I checked the log again and saw my name signed off while I was still standing there, pen in hand? What if I was already the copy and the real me was long gone? Winter nights carry a kind of silence that feels wrong. The kind where every sound, every crunch of snow, every shift of wind becomes louder than it should be. That was the kind of night I was driving into when dispatch called me out to Route 12. Single vehicle accident. Caller reports a rollover. Possible injuries, the radio said. It was just past midnight. Snow had been falling for hours, coating everything in a pale sheet of white. The kind of snow that reflects the cruiser's headlights back at you, making it hard to tell where the road ends and the woods begin. Accidents weren't unusual this time of year. Black ice would hide under the snow, waiting to catch the tires of some unlucky driver. But the voice on the call, something about the way the caller spoke stuck with me. They hadn't said, "I saw a crash." They said, "There's a car in the ditch. It's just sitting there. Just sitting there." I arrived 20 minutes later, creeping along the frozen stretch of Route 12. My lights caught it first, dark metal bent against the white. The shape of a car turned wrong against the ditch. I eased the cruiser to a stop, the tires crunching. The vehicle was mangled, flipped on its side, windshield shattered. Steam, or maybe smoke, curled up into the air and vanished into the night. Snow clung to the jagged edges of metal as if trying to bury it. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, boots sinking into the powder. The cold bit deep, straight through the uniform. I pulled my collar tighter, breath misting in front of me. "Hello?" I called, raising my voice over the wind. "Highway patrol. Anybody inside?" The beam of my light cut across twisted steel, broken glass, and dark stains I didn't want to name yet. I leaned down, peering through the broken window. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger side, too. No one. But there had been someone. Blood smeared the glass, not just on the outside, but along the inside of the doorframe. Drops clung to the gear shift, the dashboard. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to know whoever had been inside hadn't walked away clean. I circled around to the back, my boots sinking deeper into snowdrifts where the plow hadn't passed yet. That's when I saw them tracks, not tire marks, footprints. Leading away from the wreck, pressed deep into the snow, but they weren't steady. They staggered, veered, overlapped. A blood trail marked each step, dark against the white. I crouched, shining my light over it. Drops, smears, even the mark of a hand pressed into the snow at one point. Whoever it was, they'd been badly hurt. But instead of staying with the car, they'd wandered off into the trees. I stood there for a long moment, listening. The woods loomed dark and heavy beyond the road, the branches coated in ice. Every gust of wind sent them creaking like old doors. Protocol said to wait for backup. But protocol doesn't mean much when you picture someone bleeding out alone in the cold. So I followed. The prints led me off the road, down into the ditch and into the tree line. My light cut a narrow path through the dark, the snow swallowing the sound of my steps. The further I went, the quieter everything became. No owls, no animals, just the crunch of snow and the rasp of my breath. The trail twisted between trees, always forward, always deeper. At one point, I found a smear of blood on the bark where someone had steadied themselves. At another, the outline of a body pressed into the snow, like they'd collapsed and forced themselves back up again. But what unsettled me wasn't just the blood. It was the footprints. They weren't alone. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the more I looked, the more I saw it. A second set of tracks. Faint, but there. Larger, heavier, following the first. And here's the part that froze me worse than the cold ever could. Those second tracks. They didn't start at the car. They started a few yards into the woods, as if something or someone had been waiting there. I stopped, heart hammering, the beam of my flashlight trembling as I swept it around the trees. Nothing but black trunks and white snow, shadows stretching long in the light. But the tracks were there. I couldn't deny that. One person running, one person following, and the one following wasn't bleeding. I kept moving, though every instinct screamed at me to turn back. The trail led deeper still, the trees pressing tighter, the silence swallowing me whole. My breath grew ragged. My legs burned from pushing through the snow. Finally, I broke into a small clearing. My light caught something half buried in snow near the far edge. A shoe. I trudged closer, crouching down. It was a man's sneaker, the fabric soaked through, frozen stiff. Drops of blood stained the laces, frozen into the fibers. The footprints ended here, both sets. The snow around the shoe was disturbed, churned up like there had been a struggle. Imprints of knees, hands, drag marks, then nothing. Just smooth, untouched snow leading further into the trees. No body. No more blood. No sign of where they'd gone. It was as if the snow itself had swallowed them whole. I stood there, light darting from one side of the clearing to the other, desperate for something, anything that made sense. My breath came fast, fogging up the beam, but there was nothing. The tracks just ended. I don't know how long I stayed there, crouched in the cold, listening to the creak of the branches above. Long enough for the silence to start pressing in, long enough for me to realize no backup was coming. Finally, I backed away. Step by step, my light fixed on the path I'd taken. When I reached the road again, the wreck still sat there, steaming quietly against the snow. Empty, waiting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there in those trees. Maybe the injured driver, maybe the thing that had followed them. Maybe both. All I know is the snow keeps its secrets. And that night, it kept one more. By the time I made it home that night, I didn't even bother undressing. I just dropped onto the couch, boots and all, and stared at the wall until the sun came up. My radio sat on the table, muted, as if hearing another voice would break me for good. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself the tracks, the prints on the glass, all of it, there had to be an explanation. The woods can play tricks on your mind. Snow can make patterns that don't mean anything, but deep down I knew better, and the next morning proved it. They sent me back out to the crash site, said they'd finally found the driver. I remember the drive. The snow was brighter that day, blinding against the low winter sun. The plows had cleared the road, but the shoulders were piled high with white banks. My hands were stiff on the wheel. Every shadow looked wrong. Every bend felt like it was hiding something. When I pulled up to the wreck, there were already two vehicles parked nearby, an ambulance and another cruiser. A couple of EMTs stood off to the side, their breath puffing in the cold. They weren't working. They weren't even moving much, just standing there, staring into the ditch. That was my first clue something was wrong. I killed the engine, stepped out, boots crunching in the snow. The air hit me like knives. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice rough. One of the EMTs turned, pale beneath his cap. He just lifted a gloved hand and pointed down into the ditch. I followed his gaze, and there he was, the driver. Lying half buried in the snow, no more than 10 feet from the car. His body was twisted at an angle, one arm reaching out toward the road. His clothes were torn, stiff with frost. But it was his face that stopped me cold. I've seen death before. I've seen car wrecks, shootings, suicides, but nothing like that. His eyes were wide open, frozen solid, with crystals forming at the edges. His mouth was stretched impossibly wide, teeth bared, lips split and blackened from the cold. He looked like he'd died screaming, not just in pain, in terror. I swallowed hard, the taste of metal filling my mouth. "Exposure?" one of the EMTs asked softly, almost like he didn't believe his own words. "Maybe," the other said, though his voice cracked halfway through. But no one moved closer. Not them, not me. We just stood there, staring at that face. I couldn't shake the feeling he hadn't just died out there. He hadn't just frozen. He'd seen something. Something that froze him before the snow ever did. I forced myself down the bank, boots sliding, knees stiff. I crouched beside the body, my breath fogging the air. The detail was worse up close. His skin wasn't just pale. It was gray, almost translucent in places, like the cold had hollowed him out. His lips were pulled so far back I thought the skin would tear. Frost lined his nostrils, his lashes, and the eyes. God, the eyes. They didn't just look wide. They looked fixed. Staring at something above, beyond, like whatever he'd seen had stayed with him even as he froze to death. I reached out, my gloved hand trembling, and brushed a bit of ice from his cheek. His skin was rock hard, frozen solid, but there was something else. Around his face, pressed into the frost, shapes, faint, smears in the snow, as though something had leaned over him, pressing close while he died. The marks weren't clear enough to make out fully, but they weren't random either. They looked like hands, too many of them. I stood up fast, my boots slipping in the ice. My breath came hard, each exhale sharp in the frozen air. I wanted to call it in. To get back up, To get this body out of here and never look back. But I couldn't move. I just kept staring at him, at that awful mask of fear, because the truth was sinking in. The night before, when I'd seen the prints circling my cruiser, he'd been out there too, somewhere close, still alive, and whatever had been following him, whatever had made those tracks, it hadn't finished with him yet. It had waited. It had taken its time, and it had left him like this, frozen in place, screaming into the silence. I finally forced myself back up the bank, my legs like lead. The EMTs didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. The look on my face must have told them everything. We loaded him up in silence, the body stiff as a plank beneath the sheet. Even covered, I could still see the outline of his face. That mouth, those eyes, they haunt me still. I didn't ride back with them. I couldn't. I sat in my cruiser long after they'd gone, the engine running, the heater blasting, trying to shake the chill. But no matter how high I cranked the heat, I couldn't get warm. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was inside me. And I kept thinking about the look on his face. The way the snow had been pressed down around him, as if by hands I couldn't see. I kept thinking, if something could do that to him, it could do the same to me. Maybe it already had. Because when I finally looked in the rearview mirror, I swear for a split second, I didn't see my own reflection. I saw his mouth. Wide eyes frozen open. Like I'd already been marked. Like it was only a matter of time. It was around 3 in the morning when dispatch sent me to check a call box out on Highway 6. Most of those old roadside phones had been out of service for years, but once in a while, one would light up and someone had to check. Usually it was a short, bad wiring, a prank. Nothing serious. I pulled over onto the shoulder, the cruiser headlights cutting through the fog. The call box stood about 20 feet off the road, half buried in weeds and rimed with frost. The kind of thing you'd pass 100 times without noticing. The air was sharp that night, the kind of cold that makes your lungs ache. I left the engine running and stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. My flashlight beam caught the faded yellow paint of the call box. The handset dangled from its cord, swaying slightly in the wind. That was already wrong. Those phones are dead. They don't just start ringing. And even if they did, no one should have been there to answer it. But dispatch had flagged it because someone had. A woman crying. I remember hesitating, just standing there with the beam of my flashlight shaking a little. My breath fogged the air in short, uneven bursts. Finally, I forced myself forward and picked up the receiver. Hello? For a second, there was nothing but static. Then, a voice. Faint, shaking. A woman's voice. Please. Oh God. Please, you have to help me. My throat went dry. This is Highway Patrol. Ma'am, what's your emergency? I can't breathe, she gasped. I can't. Please, it's dark. I can't get out. I gripped the handset tighter. Where are you? There was a pause, then a muffled sob. I'm in the trunk. He put me in the trunk. I froze. My blood felt like ice in my veins. What trunk? Do you know what car you're in? I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know. It's moving. It won't stop moving. That didn't make sense. I looked around, scanning the dark highway. Empty in both directions. No headlights. No taillights. Just me, the fog, and that dead call box. I pressed harder. Listen, I need you to stay calm. Who put you there? Do you know where you were taken from? No, she said, and her voice cracked into a raw, guttural cry. Please, he's going to come back. I can't. The line hissed with static, swallowing her words. I turned toward the cruiser, my free hand fumbling for the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got a live call from callbox 77, Highway 6. Female caller says she's trapped in a vehicle trunk. Possible abduction. I need a trace, the radio crackled. Unit 12, copy. Stand by. I swallowed hard and brought the receiver back to my ear. Ma'am, are you still there? For a long second, there was only static. Then I heard it, breathing. Shallow, frantic. I can hear him, she whispered. Who? Who can you hear? The driver. He's talking to himself. He keeps saying my name. A chill crawled up the back of my neck. What's your name? Silence. Then, in the faintest whisper, Rachel. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Rachel, listen to me. We're going to find you, all right? I need you to stay with me. Can you tell me anything about the car? The sound of the engine, anything at all? There was a pause, then a muffled thump, a scraping sound, like she'd shifted against the trunk wall. It's loud, she whispered. It rattles when it hits bumps. I think the seats are leather. I can smell it. Please, get me out of here. My radio cut in again. Unit 12 dispatch. Negative on the trace. That call box isn't connected to any active line. Repeat, there's no phone service on Highway 6. I froze. My eyes drifted to the handset in my hand. The cord was frayed. The metal was rusted, but I could still hear her breathing. Rachel, I said slowly, how are you calling me right now? She started to cry again, soft and broken. Please don't leave me. Don't hang up. He'll know. If you hang up, he'll know. I pressed the handset tight to my ear, heart pounding so hard it made my vision swim. Rachel, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. Her sobs quieted, just for a moment. I could hear her breaths, shaky and fast. Then she whispered something that chilled me to the bone. He knows you're listening. I jerked, glancing around the empty highway. My breath fogged in quick bursts, the silence pressing in from every direction. What did you say? He knows, she repeated. Her voice was lower now, almost like someone else was speaking through her. He knows your voice. My stomach dropped. Rachel, I need you to explain. Who knows my voice? But the line broke into static, louder this time. Sharp enough that I pulled the handset away. Through the hiss, I swore I heard something else, another voice, low, male, too faint to make out, but it was there beneath her sobbing. I pressed the receiver back to my ear, straining. Then the line went dead. Just like that. Silence. No static. No breathing, nothing. I stood there, frozen, the dead handset still pressed to my ear. The fog had thickened, curling around me like smoke. For a moment, it felt like I wasn't alone on that road. I dropped the handset, letting it swing gently against the side of the call box. My legs felt weak as I staggered back to the cruiser. My hands shook as I grabbed the radio. Dispatch Unit 12, I had direct contact. Female caller identified herself as Rachel, possible abduction victim. She claims she's in the trunk of a moving vehicle. Did you copy that? A pause. Then Unit 12, we copy. But again, there is no working line on Highway 6. That call box isn't active. It hasn't been for years. I stared out at the dark road, my pulse hammering in my ears. But I knew what I'd heard. The breathing, the sobbing, the way her voice cracked when she said my name, and the other sound, the one underneath. The man, the one she said knew me. Even now I can still hear her last words ringing in my head, not the sobs. Not the plea for help, just that one final whisper. He knows your voice. And the worst part? Sometimes, when I'm driving that same stretch of highway, my radio crackles with static. And I swear, if I listen closely enough, I can still hear her. I barely slept after that night. Even back at the station, the sound of her voice stuck with me. The raw panic. The way she kept begging, over and over, like she knew time was running out. And the other part, the part I didn't want to think about. The man's voice I swore I heard underneath hers. The one that felt directed at me. I tried to write it all up in my report. I wrote it straight like procedure demanded. Female caller, possible abduction, voice identified as Rachel. Then I added the details dispatch gave me. No service lines on Highway 6. Call box inactive. It looked crazy on paper. Reading it back, I almost tore the report up. But the truth was, I couldn't shake it. The next day, I went back. The fog had lifted, the air sharp and clear. The call box looked even older in daylight. Chipped paint, rust running down the pole, weeds curling around the base. It looked dead, like a grave marker forgotten on the side of the road. I opened the panel. Inside, the wiring was corroded, half-eaten by time and weather. A nest of spiders had taken up where wires used to run. The receiver cord was brittle, cracking in my hand. No way it had carried a call. No way. I traced the conduit down into the soil, followed the path a few feet until it disappeared under the gravel shoulder. That should have been the end of it, but I couldn't stop. I drove back into town, went straight to records, The clerk looked at me funny when I asked about Highway 6 call boxes. Still, she dug into the old archives. Finally, she found it. The box I'd answered, the one marked Callbox 77, had been disconnected in 1999, 24 years ago. My hands felt numb as I held the record. There was no mistaking it. That box had been dead since before I was even on the force, so who the hell had I spoken to? I told myself maybe I was overtired. Maybe the stress of the job had gotten to me. Midnight shifts, long drives on empty highways, silence broken only by the hum of tires and the radio crackling. You start to hear things, but when I closed my eyes, I still heard her voice, clear as if she were sitting in the seat beside me. Please don't hang up. Don't hang up. He'll know. That night I parked on Highway 6 again. I told myself it was to check the stretch for stranded drivers. But really, I wanted to see the call box again. The road was empty, moonlight spilling across the cracked asphalt. When I slowed near the marker, the beam of my headlights cut across the weeds, and for a split second, I thought I saw the handset swinging, but when I got out, it hung still against the side of the box, cold, silent. I forced myself to walk closer. My boots crunched over the gravel. The fog hadn't rolled in yet, but the air felt heavy, like the night was holding its breath. I reached for the handset. The cord cracked under my fingers. I lifted it. Dead silence. Not even static. I held it there. Waiting, nothing. Then I heard it, not from the receiver, but from the dark highway behind me, a faint sound. Sobbing. I spun. Flashlight beam cutting across the road. Empty. No cars, no people. Just the long black stretch of highway. But I know what I heard. A woman crying. My throat tightened as I brought the receiver back to my ear. This time faintly I swore I caught something. Not a voice, just the shallow, ragged rhythm of breathing. I jerked back, nearly dropping it. When I held it again, there was nothing. Just dead air. I don't remember driving back. The whole time, I felt like someone was in the car with me. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her sitting there, her face pale and wet with tears. The next morning, I asked one of the older guys on the force about Highway 6. He looked at me for a long time before he spoke. "You mean the call boxes?" "Yeah," I said carefully. He leaned back, shaking his head. "They've been dead a long time. You know why? Because of what happened back then." I felt my stomach tighten. "What happened?" He hesitated. Then he lowered his voice. "They never solved it. Girl went missing, late 90s. Last place she was heard from, one of those call boxes. She was screaming for help. By the time they sent a unit out, the line was dead. They found nothing. The room seemed to tilt. What was her name?" I asked, though I already knew. He frowned, trying to remember. Then he said it. "Rachel." "Rachel something. Don't remember the last name?" I felt cold all over. I didn't tell him I'd heard her, that I'd spoken to her, that she'd begged me not to hang up, that she'd told me someone knew my voice. I just nodded, thanked him, and walked out. But that night, when I got back on the road, every static pop in my radio made my stomach twist. Every shadow on the shoulder looked like someone waiting. I can't explain what happened out there. I don't try anymore. All I know is that the call box has been dead for 24 years, and somehow I answered it. And worse, someone answered me back. Most nights I take the same road, a 2-lane highway that runs flat and straight through 20 miles of nothing. No lights, no towns, just an endless black ribbon stretching out under the stars. We call it the Graveyard Mile. I don't know who started the name, but it stuck. Maybe because of all the crosses planted in the dirt shoulders, little wooden markers wrapped with plastic flowers. I counted once. 17 of them. All in less than a mile. You don't notice them during the day. But at night, with your headlights catching the white paint and bent metal, they jump out at you, like ghosts frozen at the edge of the road. That's when the stretch feels longest. It's not just the silence, it's the way the dark swallows everything. Drive long enough, and you start to wonder if you'll ever see another car. Sometimes I'll go 15 minutes without passing anyone. Just me, the engine, and the void pressing in on all sides. I tell myself it's routine. I've done it for years. The road's always been the same, flat, predictable, safe, if you respect it. But no matter how many times I drive it, There's always that moment, usually around mile marker 143, when the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Like the night itself is watching. It's stupid, I know. Just nerves, or maybe the quiet getting to me. But the feeling's real, and once it settles in, it doesn't let go. Sometimes I crack the window just to hear something other than my own breathing. The rush of cold air helps. It reminds me the world is still out there, even if I can't see it. But most nights I keep the windows shut. Because the air smells different out here. Like dirt and rain, even when the sky's clear, and sometimes it smells like rot. I never tell anyone that part. People already think I'm superstitious for the way I talk about the stretch. I don't want to give them more reason to laugh. Still, I can't shake the feeling. The graveyard mile has a weight to it, like the roads carrying more than just cars. It started years back during one of my first midnight shifts. I was new to the route, still memorizing the markers and learning how the fog rolled in. That night, I felt it for the first time. That prickling unease. I remember checking the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind me. But there was nothing. Just my own reflection, pale in the glass. That's when I noticed something strange. For a second, I thought I saw movement on the shoulder. A figure, maybe. Someone standing near the crosses. But when I slowed and leaned forward, it was gone. I laughed it off. My mind playing tricks in the dark. Except the next night, the same thing happened. And the night after that, always the same stretch. Always that same sense of being watched. I started driving faster through that section. Not reckless, just enough to shorten the time I spent there. But the thing about the graveyard mile is that speeding doesn't help. The road doesn't care how fast you go. It always feels endless. Like the blacktop stretches itself just to keep you there. One night, a few months back, I clocked it on the odometer. I knew the distance, knew it should have taken me less than 2 minutes. But when I checked the dash, it said 4 full minutes. I told myself I must have miscounted. But deep down, I knew better. The road doesn't measure time the way we do. People don't talk about it. Not openly. But every driver knows. You see it in the way they tense up when the mile markers change. The way they avoid eye contact when you mention it. Once I asked a trucker about it just to see what he'd say. He gave me this long, quiet look. Then muttered something I'll never forget. "It's the kind of road that remembers you," he said. I didn't ask him to explain. I've thought about that a lot since. Because sometimes, when I'm halfway down that stretch, I feel like the road does know me. Like it's holding on to something I don't want to remember. The strangest part? I can't recall a single drive where I didn't feel uneasy. Even in the beginning. Even before I had reason. It's like that dread has always been there. Waiting. And lately it's been getting worse. It's not just the shadows on the shoulder anymore. Not just the smell or the crosses or the way time bends. Now it's the quiet. The silence used to feel empty, but now it feels full, thick, like the dark is crowded with things I can't see. Last week, for the first time, I pulled over. I don't even know why I did it. My chest was tight, my palms slick on the wheel. I just needed to stop, to breathe. The moment I killed the engine, the silence rushed in. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I sat there staring at the gravel shoulder. My headlights lit up the crosses. A dozen pale markers standing in a row, each one catching the light just enough to glow. And then I heard something, a faint scraping, like metal dragging over stone. It was coming from the dark beyond the beams. I held my breath, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The sound grew closer, slow and deliberate. Scrape, pause, scrape. I gripped the wheel, my heart hammering. I wanted to turn the key, to drive. But I couldn't move. Then just as sudden as it started, it stopped. The silence came rushing back. I waited, staring into the black, but nothing moved. Finally, I forced myself to restart the engine. As soon as I did, relief flooded me. The sound of the motor, the feel of the wheel. It was like coming back to life. I didn't stop again. I won't stop again. Because whatever's out there, I don't think it wants me to. Now, every time I take that road, I feel it stronger. The pull, the weight. The sense that the graveyard mile isn't just a stretch of asphalt. It's something else, something alive. And it's waiting. It was about 2 in the morning when I noticed them. A pair of headlights in the mirror hanging far back on the road. Now, normally that wouldn't mean much. Cars are rare on that stretch, but they're not impossible. The thing was, I'd been driving for nearly 30 minutes without seeing another soul. Nothing in front of me. Nothing behind. Just the lonely blacktop stretching out forever. So when those lights suddenly appeared, I couldn't help but tense. They stayed back, a good 50 yards. Not too close, not too far. Just enough that I could see the glow bouncing off the mirrors. At first, I told myself it was fine. Just another driver heading the same way. Probably someone as tired as me. But after a while, I noticed something strange. They never got closer. I slowed down. Dropped 10-15 miles an hour. The headlights slowed too. I sped back up, pushing the needle well past the limit. They matched me, keeping the same distance like they were tied to my bumper by an invisible rope. The unease I'd felt the night before came rushing back, sharp and heavy. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white in the glow of the dash. Minutes dragged by. The lights never wavered. Finally, I decided to test it. I eased onto the shoulder and pulled over, gravel crunching under the tires. The car behind me should have passed. That's what any normal driver would do. But as soon as I stopped, their headlights blinked out. Gone. I sat there, stunned. The road behind me was empty. No red taillights disappearing into the distance. No engine fading into the night. Just darkness. I waited. 5 minutes, maybe longer? Nothing. My pulse hammered as I eased back onto the highway. The silence pressed down harder than before, heavier with every mile marker I passed. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe I'd been more tired than I realized. Maybe my mind had invented those lights just to fill the empty road. But then, 10 minutes later, they came back. I saw them in the mirror, flaring to life like someone had flipped a switch. Same distance, same steady glow. This time, my skin crawled. I didn't pull over right away. I just drove mile after mile watching those lights. They never drifted, never swerved, never even flickered. Always perfect, always the same. Finally, I couldn't take it. I slowed again, eased onto the gravel shoulder. The instant my tires crunched to a stop, the lights vanished. I stared into the rear view, my breath fogging the glass. My mouth was dry and my heart thudded so hard I thought I might choke on it. Nothing moved. The road was as empty as the night sky. I stayed there longer this time, 10 minutes, maybe 15, long enough for the cold to seep in, biting through the heater's weak breath. Still nothing. When I finally started driving again, I told myself I wouldn't look in the mirror. That if I just focused on the road ahead, I could shake the feeling. But of course, I did look, and there they were. Headlights, steady, waiting. That's when I realized something that chilled me deeper than the cold ever could. The lights weren't just following me. They were watching me. I don't know how I knew it. I just felt it. The way you know someone's eyes are on you in a crowded room. The weight of it pressing between your shoulder blades. Except this wasn't a crowded room. This was a deserted highway. Just me and whatever was behind me. My throat was tight. Every instinct screamed at me to drive faster, but I didn't. Because I knew speed wouldn't matter. I could floor it or crawl, and those lights would stay the same. So instead, I tried to outthink it. I took the next turnoff, a narrow service road that cut back toward the main highway a few miles down. If there really was a car behind me, they'd either follow or keep going straight. I made the turn sharp, gravel spraying out behind me. My hands shook as I flicked off my headlights for a moment, plunging the car into black. When I turned them back on, I checked the mirror. Empty. For the first time all night, I let out a shaky laugh. Relief hit me hard, almost dizzying. I told myself it was over, but when I rolled back onto the highway, my stomach dropped. They were there. Headlights, perfectly spaced. Perfectly steady, already waiting. It didn't make sense. There was no way they could have known where I'd come out. No way they could have beaten me there without passing. Unless they'd never been behind me at all. The thought made my blood run cold. Because if they weren't following in the way I understood, then what were they? The rest of the drive is a blur. I don't remember the miles, only the growing weight in my chest, the sick realization that no matter what I did, I couldn't shake them. Every time I tried to stop, they vanished. Every time I moved, they returned, like shadows caught in the glass. By the time I reached the end of the graveyard mile, dawn was just starting to gray the horizon. And with the first touch of light, the headlights blinked out for the last time. The road behind me was clear. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was dread, because deep down, I knew they weren't gone. Not really, they were waiting, and the next time I drove that road, they'd be back. I told myself I wouldn't look in the mirror anymore. That if I kept my eyes on the road, just focused on the broken lines stretching into the dark, maybe I could finish the shift without losing my mind. But the thing about mirrors is, they pull at you. Even when you swear you won't, your eyes drift. And when mine did, the headlights were still there. I'd been followed so long, the glow felt burned into the glass. Steady, patient, like whoever was behind me had all the time in the world. After miles of this, something changed. The car edged closer, just enough that the light grew sharper, the beams flaring against the corners of my mirror. For the first time, I thought I might get a look at them. So I slowed. Just a little. Let the gap close until the shape of a car emerged from the dark. A sedan, low and nondescript. Could have been any cruiser, any vehicle on the highway. My pulse hammered as I leaned toward the mirror. The glare made it hard to see, but there it was. The plate. And that's when my stomach dropped, because the numbers weren't just familiar. They were mine. The exact same plate as the car I was driving. At first, my brain rejected it. I blinked, shook my head, tried to convince myself the light was distorting the view. But no. I slowed again, just enough for the reflection to steady, and there it was. Clear as day, my patrol car's plate. It didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. For a few seconds, I just sat frozen, hands locked on the wheel, eyes glued to that impossible reflection. It was like staring into a funhouse mirror, except the image wasn't warped. It was perfect. Too perfect. I wanted to radio dispatch, to tell someone, anyone, what I was seeing. But the thought of explaining it out loud, of hearing my own voice tremble, made me clamp my mouth shut. Instead, I pressed harder on the gas. The engine roared, the speedometer climbing, 90, 100. The road blurred beneath me, snow kicking up at the edges. And yet, the headlights didn't fall back. I checked the mirror again. The car was still there. Same distance, same steady glow, clinging to me like a shadow. And that plate. My plate, I can't explain the kind of fear that brings. It wasn't just being followed anymore. It was like being hunted by myself. Like something had slipped into my skin, stolen my number, my identity, and was chasing me down with it. I took the next exit sharp, tires screaming against the ice. My hands shook on the wheel as I barreled down the narrow road, weaving through the black trees pressing close on both sides. The headlights followed. No hesitation, no stumble. They took the turn perfectly, like they knew exactly where I was going. That's when the panic started. Not the surface kind, the deep, bone-level kind that makes your thoughts turn to static. I could barely breathe. I kept thinking if I looked away, if I blinked too long, the car behind me would close the gap and there'd be nothing left between us. I don't remember how long I drove like that. Minutes? Hours? The world shrank to the strip of blacktop in front of me and the glow of myself chasing me down. Finally, I did something desperate. I killed the lights. One quick twist of the knob, and my cruiser plunged into darkness. The only thing left was the faint gray glow of the sky, the crunch of tires on frozen pavement. For a few long seconds, the headlights behind me burned brighter against the dark. I thought maybe it had worked. Maybe I'd forced it to show its hand. But then, they flickered and vanished. Gone. The road behind me was empty. I didn't turn my lights back on right away. I drove blind, knuckles aching on the wheel, heart in my throat. When I finally flicked them back on, the mirror showed nothing, just the endless stretch of road dissolving into the dark. I should have felt relief. But what I felt instead was worse, because if the car wasn't behind me anymore, then where was it? Every noise inside the cruiser seemed louder. The hum of the heater, the static pop of the radio, the soft rattle of the dash cam mount. I kept glancing at the rear view, then the side mirrors, then back to the road. My skin prickled with the certainty that any second I'd see those headlights again, but I didn't, not in the mirror. Instead, they bloomed in front of me. 1 second, the road was empty. The next, there it was. A car, my car, same model, same light bar, same everything. And that plate, my plate, it was sitting dead center in the lane, facing me. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming against the black ice. The cruiser fishtailed hard, swerving sideways. For a moment, I thought I was going to hit it head on, metal shattering against metal, glass exploding like ice in a furnace. But when the car should have hit, when there should have been the impact, the crunch, the pain, it wasn't there. The road was empty. I sat there shaking. The smell of hot rubber thick in the cab, my chest heaving as I tried to steady my breath. No headlights, no car, nothing, just me, alone on the graveyard mile. But even now, I can't shake what I saw. That plate, my plate, the reflection of myself, driving where I shouldn't be, chasing me down like it was waiting for the moment we finally met. And sometimes, when I'm out there on that stretch again, I feel it. Not just behind me, not just in the mirror, ahead, waiting, like one night. I'm going to turn the corner and see myself there again, and next time, I don't think it'll vanish. I told myself I wouldn't drive that stretch anymore, that after what I saw, the plate, the headlights, the way my own car seemed to flicker in and out of existence, I'd take another route. File the right paperwork. Pretend it was nothing but fatigue and bad roads. But duty has a way of pulling you back. Dispatch sent me down the graveyard mile again a few nights later. Routine patrol, nothing special. The same lonely blacktop, the same skeletal trees clawing up from the ditches, the same weight in my gut telling me I didn't belong there, and the same feeling of being followed. At first, I tried to ignore it. I kept my eyes locked on the pavement, refusing to touch the mirror. But it was impossible. The longer I stared ahead, the more my skin crawled until finally I gave in. The headlights were there, right behind me. Perfectly steady. I didn't flinch this time. I didn't speed up, didn't pull off onto the shoulder. I was tired of running, so I slowed down. My cruiser's brakes groaned, tires humming as the car rolled to a stop in the middle of that frozen road. I killed the siren light, shut off the spotlight, and let the night swallow me. Behind me, the headlights stopped too. For a long moment, nothing moved. Just two beams burning into my mirror, as though the other driver was waiting for me to decide what happened next. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself to open the door and step out into the cold. The air hit me sharp and biting, snow crunching beneath my boots. The silence out there was heavy, broken only by the low idle of my engine. I walked into the middle of the road and turned toward the lights. At first, all I could see was glare. Two white orbs cutting through the dark, blinding me. I raised my hand, squinting, trying to make out the shape behind them, and then they dimmed. Like someone turned a dial, the beams softened until I could finally see the car. My car. Not just the same make or model, the same everything. Same light bar, same scratches on the bumper. Same dent on the fender from a run-in with a deer last winter. And there, glowing faintly in the dark, the same plate. My plate, but it wasn't just the car that froze me in place. It was the fact that it sat there idling, driver's door wide open, as if someone had just stepped out moments before. And yet the seat was empty. I could see it clear as day, the pale glow of the dashboard lighting up a cabin with no one inside. I stood in the middle of the road, staring at my own abandoned cruiser humming in the dark. The breath caught in my throat, frosting the air in short bursts. A sick thought crawled into my head. If that was my car, what was I standing in? My boots felt glued to the pavement, but I forced myself forward. One step, then another. The snow crunched underfoot, too loud in the silence. I half expected the car to vanish the closer I got. Just blink out like a mirage, but it didn't. It stayed there, steady, waiting. When I reached the driver's side door, I leaned in. The engine purred. The dashboard glowed. And there on the seat was my logbook, open. Pen resting across the pages like I had just set it down. The entries made my stomach twist. The handwriting was mine. The times were mine. The calls were the exact ones I'd responded to that week. Only one detail was wrong. The date. Every page was stamped with the next day. I staggered back, heart hammering against my ribs. The snow beneath me blurred as my vision swam, and I nearly dropped to my knees. That's when the radio crackled. Not from the cruiser I'd been driving, but from the one in front of me. The abandoned one. A burst of static, sharp enough to make me flinch. Then a voice, my voice. Unit 34, end of watch. The words came flat, calm, like I'd said them 1,000 times before. But I hadn't. Not that night. I stared into the cabin as the voice faded, leaving only the sound of the idling engine. My throat went dry. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The night pressed in tighter around me, the trees looming closer, shadows stretching across the snow like long skeletal hands. The wind cut through my uniform, sharp enough to sting, and then the headlights blinked out. In an instant, the car was gone. No idle, no glow, no trace of tires in the snow. Just the empty road stretching behind me, as though nothing had ever been there. I spun, desperate, certain it would be behind me again. But the road ahead and behind was bare. Only my cruiser, the one I'd stepped out of, sat waiting. Door open, engine still humming low. I stumbled back to it, climbed inside, and slammed the door shut like it could protect me from whatever I'd just seen. My hands shook so bad I could barely grip the wheel. I didn't call dispatch. I didn't log it. What could I say? That I'd stopped in the middle of the highway and found myself sitting there in another car waiting. That I'd heard my own voice signing out of a shift that wasn't over. They'd bench me, or worse. So I drove. I didn't stop until I reached the station, until the faint glow of town bled the night from my windshield. Only then did I let myself breathe, let myself believe I'd escaped whatever was out there. But I know better now. Because sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear it again. That voice. My voice, calm and steady, like a man with no fear, no doubt. No blood left in his veins. Unit 34, end of watch. And I know one night I'll be sent down the graveyard mile again. And when I stop in the road and the headlights flare behind me, I won't find an empty cruiser. This time I'll be sitting in it, and I'll be smiling. I'd been driving too long that night. My shift was almost over, and my eyes felt heavy, dragging against the dark highway. That stretch of road had always been brutal. Mile after mile of nothing but pine trees, broken fences, and the occasional half-lit gas station. So when I saw the glow of Rest Stop 14, I pulled in without even thinking. I'd been there a few times before. It was one of those old roadside buildings, faded red brick, flickering lights over the entrance, a vending machine that almost never worked. The kind of place you don't linger, but you're glad it exists when you're miles from anywhere else. I parked the cruiser and stepped out into the cold air. The lot was empty, just my headlights spilling across the cracked pavement. That's when I heard it. A scream. It cut through the night, sharp and raw, coming from inside the building. Not a playful scream, not a drunk laugh. It was the kind of sound that made your stomach tighten immediately. I moved fast. My boots hit the pavement, my hand already at my belt. The scream came again, higher this time, echoing from the direction of the women's restroom. I pushed the door open, and the smell of bleach hit me. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, too bright against the dingy tiles. The sound had stopped. The bathroom was still. I stepped inside, calling out, "Ma'am, you all right in here?" No answer. Just the faint hum of the light and the drip of a sink that wouldn't stop running. I walked past the sinks, toward the stalls. The metal doors were all closed, lined up in a row. My chest felt tight, like something was waiting on the other side. I tapped the first door. "Hello, you need help?" No sound. I pushed it open. Empty. The toilet bowl was clean, the seat down, nothing unusual. I moved to the next one. Same thing. The third stall? I hesitated. The air felt colder by that door, the way it sometimes does in old buildings, but sharper. Like the air itself had teeth. I reached for it. The metal was freezing under my palm. I pushed it open slowly, expecting someone crouched inside, maybe hurt, maybe hiding. But the stall was empty. Every single stall was empty. I stood there, listening, trying to catch the faintest sound of breathing, footsteps, anything, but there was nothing. Just the buzz of the light and that damn dripping sink. I backed up, scanning the room. My pulse was still racing, my ears straining for movement. Then I noticed something strange. One of the mirrors above the sinks had a crack running through it. I didn't remember that being there before. It split the glass right down the middle, and in the fractured reflection, I looked wrong, not just distorted by the crack. The me in the mirror was standing still, but his mouth was slightly open like he was whispering something. I blinked, leaned closer. But when I did, my reflection was normal again, just me. Pale, tired, unsettled. I told myself it was nothing, just fatigue. Long shift, low light, imagination playing tricks, but I couldn't shake it. The scream had been real. I heard it as clear as day, echoing off the tiles. Someone had been here. I checked the corners of the room again, crouched down, looked under the stalls for any sign of feet. Nothing. Not even dirt on the floor that looked fresh. That was when the quiet hit me harder than the scream had. The silence was absolute, pressing against my ears. I couldn't even hear the highway anymore. It felt like I was the only person left in the whole rest stop. I turned and left the bathroom, the fluorescent hum trailing behind me as the door creaked shut. Outside, the lot was still empty, the night colder. My cruiser sat exactly where I left it, engine idling low. I scanned the lot, the tree line beyond, the vending machines by the entrance. No one. It was like the scream had been swallowed up, erased. But here's the thing. I can still hear it. Even now, thinking back, it echoes in my head, sharp and desperate, and I know what I heard. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick of the mind. Someone screamed for help in that bathroom, and when I got there was no one left to save. I didn't plan on going back inside. Every part of me wanted to get in my cruiser, drive off, and never look back at that place. But as I stood in the cold air outside Rest Stop 14, I couldn't shake it. That scream had been too real. And the way the bathroom felt? Wrong. Like the walls had been holding their breath. I told myself I was just checking one more time, just to be sure. The door groaned when I pushed it open again. Same bleach smell, same humming light, same dripping sink. But this time the silence felt heavier, like the air knew I had come back. I stepped farther in, forcing myself not to hesitate. My boots echoed against the tile too loud, like someone else was walking with me. The stalls stood in a row, their doors half shadowed under the harsh light. And then, one of them slammed shut. The sound cracked like a gunshot, metal against metal, echoing through the room. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze. Then another slammed shut, and another. The sound moved down the row, one by one, until every single door had banged closed on its hinges. The room trembled with the noise, and then silence again. I drew in a sharp breath, hand hovering near my radio. I hadn't touched the stalls. I hadn't even gotten close. But they had all shut themselves, like something inside wanted to keep me out, or worse, keep me in. I grabbed my radio, lifting it to my mouth. This is Unit 7, requesting backup at Rest Stop 14. Possible disturbance. Send someone now. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't care. I just needed someone else here. Someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The radio hissed back with static. I adjusted the dial, tried again. Unit 7, do you copy? Nothing but static, louder this time, rushing in my ear like a storm. I turned, backing toward the door, trying to keep my eyes on the stalls. Something was wrong with the light. It flickered faintly, shadows twitching across the tile. I gripped the handle and pulled. It didn't move. I pulled harder, twisting, shoving my shoulder against the door. Nothing. It felt like the lock had fused, or maybe like something on the other side was holding it shut. The bathroom had me. I swallowed hard, forcing the panic down. I'd been in tight situations before. You don't think? You just focus on the next move. I spun back toward the stalls. My instincts told me that whatever was happening, it started there. The row of doors was shut tight, every one of them. But I could feel eyes on me, hidden somewhere behind that steel. I stepped closer, my boots slow against the floor. "Whoever's in there," I said, voice tight. "Come out now. You're not in trouble. Just come out. The silence pressed back at me, heavy and unbroken. I reached the first stall. My hand hovered over the door. The metal was still cold, biting against my fingertips. I shoved it open. Empty. Second stall, empty. Third. The door creaked slowly open, revealing nothing but white tile and shadows. I moved down the line, each one the same, empty, silent. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I just turned fast enough, I'd catch someone ducking into the next stall ahead of me. By the time I reached the last one, my throat was dry. I pushed the door, half expecting something to lunge at me, but it swung wide to nothing, all empty. Yet the fear didn't ease. If anything, it grew worse, because now the stalls weren't hiding anything, and I still wasn't alone. The mirror caught my eye again. The crack down its center looked deeper now, jagged like a wound. I moved toward it without meaning to, like it was pulling me. My reflection stared back at me. Same tired eyes, same pale face. But then as I leaned closer, the me in the glass blinked. I hadn't. My stomach dropped. I stepped back fast, my boots slipping on the wet tile. The reflection smiled. It was faint, twisted at the edges like it enjoyed watching me flinch. I stumbled back toward the door, grabbed the handle again, pulled with everything I had. The door groaned but didn't budge. The radio at my side hissed louder like the static was rising to a scream. I pressed the button, shouting over it. "Dispatch, come in!" "Please!" The static cut, and in its place, a voice whispered through, "You're not leaving." I froze, radio still in my hand, breath caught in my chest. The voice was low, broken, almost like it was coming from underwater. I dropped the radio. It hit the floor with a sharp crack, the voice vanishing as it did. The stalls groaned behind me. Every door began to rattle, shaking hard against their hinges like something inside was trying to break free. The sound rose, metal clanging over and over, filling the room with chaos. I pressed myself against the door, heart hammering, eyes darting from stall to stall. The rattling stopped all at once. Silence. I could hear my own breathing, rough and uneven. And then, one stall door creaked open on its own. Just a sliver, just enough to show blackness inside. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Something shifted in that darkness. Not a person. Not exactly. Just a shape, low and twisting, like smoke caught under the fluorescent lights. I blinked, and it was gone. The stall stood empty again. That was when the bathroom door behind me clicked. The lock gave way. I didn't hesitate. I shoved it open, stumbling into the night air, dragging in deep breaths of cold. My boots hit the pavement hard as I backed away from the building. The lot was still empty. My cruiser still idling. The world outside looked normal, but inside that bathroom, I knew it wasn't empty. Not really. Something had been waiting there, and when I left, I swear I felt it watching, pressing against the glass, whispering through the static, and I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Even when I finally made it home, the silence of my own place didn't bring me any peace. I sat in the dark for hours, still tasting the sour smell of that bathroom, still hearing those stall doors slam shut. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the crack in the mirror and that reflection grinning back at me. I told myself I was going to put it away, pretend it hadn't happened. Just another long night, another trick of fatigue. But I couldn't stop thinking about my body cam. I hadn't remembered to turn it off when I went inside, which meant the whole thing should be on there. The slamming doors, the radio static, maybe even that warped smile in the mirror. Part of me didn't want to look. I was scared of confirming it had really happened. But the bigger part needed to know. So, before the next shift, I sat in my cruiser and pulled up the footage. The timestamp read just after 3 in the morning. The sound of my boots on tile echoed through the tiny speakers, the picture jittering with every step I'd taken. At first, it was just the bathroom as I remembered it. Empty. Silent. And then came the slam. Even knowing it was coming, I jumped. The body cam picked it up perfectly, the door rattling in its frame, the noise rolling through the tiled walls. Then another, and another. I watched myself freeze in the middle of the room, head snapping toward the sound. My voice came through tight, shaking. "This is Unit 7 requesting backup." The reply wasn't static, not on the footage, on the video. The voice came through clear. "You're not leaving!" I dropped the radio in the recording, and hearing it again through the tinny speaker made my skin crawl. I almost shut it off there, but I couldn't. I kept watching. The stalls rattled on screen, the doors trembling like something was pressing against them. I could hear the echo of my own breathing, heavy and uneven. And then the last stall creaked open. That shadowy nothing inside. I leaned closer to the screen, eyes straining to catch what I hadn't seen that night. That's when I noticed it. Not in the stalls, not in the mirror. Above me. The camera tilted slightly as I turned, catching a glimpse of the ceiling overhead. And there, just at the edge of the frame, something moved. It was crouched against the ceiling, its limbs bent wrong, its fingers spread long and thin across the tiles. Its body clung upside down, almost blending into the shadows. Its head was turned toward me. I could see its eyes reflecting faintly in the fluorescent light. Watching. It had been there the whole time. Through every slammed door, every rattle, every whispered word. It had been above me, inches above my head. I sat back in my seat, the weight of that realization pressing into my chest. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My hand shook on the pause button. I replayed it again, frame by frame. There it was. Not a trick of the light, not static, not me losing my mind. Something had been crouching there, silent, waiting, and I hadn't known. I thought back to the way the air had felt, heavy and pressing down on me. How my skin prickled like I wasn't alone. I'd thought it was nerves, just my imagination, but it wasn't. Something was in there with me. I let the footage roll forward, unable to look away even as my stomach twisted. The figure shifted once, barely moving, its body flexing like a spider testing its web. And then, as I shoved the bathroom door open on screen and stumbled out into the night, the thing stayed behind. It didn't follow. It didn't need to. It had already been close enough. I shut the video off, my hand lingering on the device longer than it should have. My reflection in the dark screen stared back at me, pale and sickly. That night at the rest stop had felt wrong. But seeing the proof, the thing above me, crouched and waiting, made it worse. Because now I knew it wasn't just a place. It wasn't just the building. It was something that lived there, and it had let me go. The thought wrapped around me tighter than the cold. Because if it had wanted to, if it had dropped down from that ceiling, no one would have ever found me. I didn't tell anyone. Not about the footage, not about the voice, not about what I saw clinging to the ceiling. Who would have believed me? They'd chalk it up to exhaustion, faulty equipment, maybe even a glitch in the video feed. But I know what I saw, and worse, I know it saw me. Because as the footage ended, just before the timestamp blinked to black, I swear I caught something else. The thing, it smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated. Just a slow, deliberate curl at the corners of its mouth. Like it was waiting. Like it wanted me to come back. And the truth is, every night since when I passed that stretch of highway, I feel it. The pull, the weight, the memory of those eyes above me. I keep telling myself I won't stop again. That I won't go near that bathroom. But sometimes, I catch myself slowing down, like some part of me is already turning back, like it isn't finished with me yet. I've done a lot of late-night highway runs in my career, but there's one that still keeps me awake, long after I left the badge behind. It started like any other pursuit, routine, straightforward. At least that's what I told myself at first. It was past 2 in the morning, out in the desert stretch between county lines. The kind of road where the headlights only ever catch sand, scrub, and the occasional jackrabbit frozen in place. I was cruising steady, fighting off the weight in my eyelids when a pair of taillights appeared up ahead. They weren't just moving fast. They were flying. I clocked the car at nearly 100. Way over the limit, reckless for a road that empty. I flipped on my lights, hit the siren, and eased down on the gas. The chase was on. At first, it felt routine. The vehicle didn't swerve, didn't try anything fancy, just kept its speed, a steady red glow against the dark horizon. I called it in, gave dispatch the basics, make, model, direction of travel. But even as the words left my mouth, I realized something felt off. Usually when a driver knows they're being chased, they either panic or push harder. But this car, it just kept moving like I wasn't even there. Same distance, same rhythm. I pressed harder on the accelerator, my cruiser humming louder. The speedometer climbed, 90, 95, 100. The desert blurred by in the edges of my vision. But no matter how fast I went, I wasn't closing the gap. The taillights stayed right there, just far enough to tease, just close enough to keep me hooked. I leaned forward, knuckles tight on the wheel, eyes straining into the black. The road stretched endlessly, a tunnel of fading yellow lines. The only sound was the siren wailing and the engine roaring beneath me. Minutes passed. 5, then 10. I kept expecting a turnoff, a crossroad, some sign of life. But the desert swallowed everything. It was just me, the car, and the black horizon, and that's when the doubt crept in. Had I actually seen the plates? Had I even gotten a clear look at the car? In the glare of the speed, in the bouncing beams of my headlights, all I could make out were those 2 red orbs glowing ahead of me, like eyes. I shook the thought off and tried the radio again. Unit 12, still in pursuit. Suspect vehicle heading east, mile marker. I glanced at the sign flashing past. My words trailed off. It was the same mile marker I'd called in 10 minutes ago. 77. I swallowed and glanced back at the road. The taillights hadn't shifted an inch. Dispatch? Confirm location? I asked, voice a little tighter than I wanted it to be. Static hissed back at me. I adjusted the dial, tapped the mic, tried again. Nothing, just white noise, sharp and cutting in the silence. It wasn't possible. I was still within range, still on familiar ground. My radio had no reason to go dead. I kept driving anyway. My pride told me I had to. You don't back off a chase, not unless you've lost them completely. But I hadn't lost them. They were right there, glowing red, just beyond reach. The desert around me grew stranger the longer I drove. The night sky looked wrong. The stars blurred, stretched thin across the black. The horizon didn't shift. No curves, no dips, just flat, endless dark. I leaned forward, heart hammering, trying to find something, anything that made sense. My speed climbed higher. 105, 110, the cruiser rattled under the strain. Still, the car never grew closer. My hands were sweating against the wheel. My throat felt tight. I thought about cutting it, about letting the car vanish into the dark and reporting it as a lost pursuit. But every time that idea crossed my mind, something deeper pushed back. It felt like the car wanted me to keep following, and I couldn't stop. I don't know how long it went on. Time bled strange out there. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been an hour. And then, without warning, the taillights flickered. Just once. A brief blink like someone tapping the brakes. My chest tightened. It was the first change. The first sign of movement other than that steady glow. Then it happened again. Flicker. On. Off. On, I realized what it looked like someone was signaling me. I slowed instinctively, confused, scanning the road ahead. The taillights pulsed again, a steady rhythm now, a pattern. 3 flashes, pause, 3. Flashes NOS, the universal distress call my. Skin went cold. The car wasn't running from me, it was calling, for help. But if that was true, then why couldn't I ever catch up? I eased off the gas, my foot trembling on the pedal. The lights didn't slow. They stayed locked in place, the pattern repeating. SOS, SOS. I tried the radio again, desperate now. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I need backup. I need confirmation. Static swallowed me whole. I was alone. The car's lights flashed once more, brighter this time. Almost blinding. I squinted, raising a hand against the glare, and when my vision cleared, the taillights were gone. The road stretched empty ahead of me. No car. No glow. Nothing. I slammed the brakes, the cruiser jerking hard as the tires screamed against the asphalt. Dust swirled in the beams of my headlights, settling into the quiet. My chest heaved. My knuckles were white. The desert was silent again. I sat there in the middle of the road, engine idling, siren still flickering against nothing at all. Then, in the mirror, I saw them, tail lights, behind me. Same distance, same glow, red, steady, unblinking. I don't remember how long I stared, frozen in place. The only thing I know is, when I finally blinked, they were gone again. And I was left with nothing but the hum of the cruiser and the desert swallowing me whole. I never caught that car. I never filed a report that made any sense. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see those taillights, out ahead of me, just out of reach. Or worse, in the mirror. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the glow in my mirror before it blinked away. Minutes, maybe. Could have been longer. Time didn't move right out there. It felt stretched, like the desert itself was pulling me thin. Eventually, though, I forced myself to breathe, to keep going. Training took over where my nerves had failed. I pushed the cruiser back into gear and rolled forward, eyes scanning the endless blacktop. I told myself it was over, that I'd lost the car, that I could chalk it up as a failed pursuit and move on. But deep down, I knew it wasn't done with me, and I was right. Maybe 15 minutes later, though again, I can't be sure. I spotted the taillights again. Same glow, same distance ahead, like they'd never left. But this time, something was different. The lights weren't steady anymore. They swerved slightly, dipping toward the shoulder of the road. Then back again. Whoever, or whatever, was driving seemed to be slowing down. I gripped the wheel tighter, leaned forward and pushed my foot back on the gas. My pulse hammered in my ears as I closed what little distance there was. For the first time all night, the gap narrowed. The car veered right, tires kicking up a faint spray of sand. Then, with a jolt that rattled my nerves, it pulled to a stop on the shoulder. My own cruiser screeched as I braked hard, adrenaline pumping fire through my veins. The red glow ahead dimmed as the taillights cut out, leaving only the pale moonlight washing over the desert. I sat there for a moment, breathing shallow, staring at the silhouette of the car. This was it. After miles of chasing, after the impossible stretch of endless road and flickering signals, I'd finally cornered it, but something inside me hesitated because it hadn't felt like I'd caught the car. It felt like the car had stopped. For me, I radioed in out of habit, voice low. Unit 12, suspect vehicle pulled over eastbound Highway 10 near mile marker. My eyes flicked to the sign. 77. Again. I froze. That wasn't possible. I had to have covered 30 miles since the last marker. At least. But the number glared back at me, bold and white. 77. My thumb hovered over the mic button, but I didn't finish the call. Because all I could hear through the speaker was static. The same hollow hiss that had followed me all night. I shoved the radio back into its cradle and forced myself out of the cruiser. The desert air hit me sharp and cold, smelling faintly of dust and something metallic. My boots crunched against the gravel shoulder as I stepped toward the stopped car. It was an older model sedan, dark blue maybe, hard to tell under the weak glow of my spotlight. The windows were tinted, the body coated in a thin layer of sand and dirt, like it had been driving through the desert for weeks. I drew closer, every step loud in the quiet, no movement inside. I reached the driver's door, hand hovering near my weapon, flashlight beam cutting across the glass. The seat was empty. I blinked, leaned closer, pressed the light again. Nothing. Not just the driver's seat, every seat. The entire car was bare. No bags, no papers. No sign anyone had ever been inside at all, except for one thing. On the passenger seat sat a CB radio. The old kind, boxy and scuffed, with a wire curling up to a handheld mic. The speaker crackled softly, spitting out waves of static. I opened the door slowly, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been touched in years. The air inside smelled stale, heavy with dust and heat baked into fabric. The CB hissed on, steady, broken only by faint clicks, like someone was pressing the mic from far away. I reached out with a shaking hand and lifted the mic. "Hello?" My voice cracked against the noise. "This is Deputy..." The static cut sharp, a brief silence. Then a voice bled through. Not words, Not clear. Just a long, low moan. It was faint, buried under the static. But it chilled me worse than the cold desert air ever could. I dropped the mic back onto the seat. Stumbling a step backward, the sound stopped instantly. I stood there in the dark, my own breath clouding in the air, staring at the empty car. It made no sense. None of it. How had I chased a driverless car for miles? Who had been flashing the SOS? I forced myself to circle around the vehicle, shining my light across the trunk, the tires, the barren stretch of sand around it. No footprints. No tire tracks except the ones leading here. It was like the car had just appeared. I wanted to call it in, to get another unit out there, but the truth pressed heavy in my chest. There was no one coming. The radio was gone. The highway was gone. Even the mile markers had betrayed me, and I wasn't sure I'd ever really left that stretch of road at all. I looked back at my cruiser, engine still idling, lights painting the sand in harsh yellow. For a moment I considered just leaving, turning around, pretending this never happened. But then the CB hissed again, and this time it spoke. Through the static came a voice, low, hollow, drawn out. Keep driving. My blood turned to ice. I backed away from the car, shaking my head like I could force the sound out. The voice repeated, stronger now, dragging every word like it hurt to say. Keep driving. I didn't wait to hear more. I spun back to my cruiser, threw myself behind the wheel, and slammed the door shut. The desert swallowed the sound of my tires as I sped off, dust spraying into the night. I didn't look back at the car, not once. But the words followed me, burned into the static that filled my ears long after the radio went dead. Keep driving, and for the first time in my career, I realized I wasn't chasing anymore. I was being led. I've heard plenty of strange things on the job, whispers on the wind, old men raving at the side of the highway, even recordings playing through busted radios. But nothing has ever cut through me the way that voice did. I'd driven miles away from that empty car, yet the static followed me. It didn't matter how far I pushed the cruiser. Didn't matter how many times I switched channels or even killed the radio completely. The hiss was still there, crawling through the speakers like it was baked into the wires. I told myself to stay calm, to keep moving. But the longer it went on, the harder it was to breathe. The desert stretched endless around me. No exits, no towns, no signs of life. Just sand, asphalt, and the low murmur of static. Then, without warning, the hiss broke. Deputy, one word, clear. Like someone had leaned into the mic only a few feet away, I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. Deputy, it said again. The voice was slow, almost warm, but I felt my blood run cold. Because it wasn't just anyone's voice. It was mine. My own voice, warped by the radio, calling out through the static. I almost ran the car off the road. My pulse slammed in my ears, sweat burning the corners of my eyes. I slammed the volume down, but even with the knob twisted to zero, the words kept coming. Thank you for filling the shift. The sound filled the cruiser, filling my head. The words stretched, heavy with meaning I couldn't place, like a joke I wasn't in on. I swallowed hard, throat dry. My first instinct was to speak back, to tell whatever it was to stop. But something in me froze, because if that voice really was mine, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what else it had to say. The radio crackled again, sharp, then steadied. You're doing fine. My jaw clenched, heart hammering against my ribs. The voice on the CB wasn't just mimicking me, it was speaking like it knew me, like it had been watching. I forced myself to grab the mic, my hand trembling. "This is Deputy Alvarez," I said, voice low, fighting the shake in it.
"Who is this?"
The response came quick. "Deputy Alvarez, my name, in my voice, drawn out, almost affectionate, always on time, always steady. You don't complain. You don't quit." I wanted to throw the mic out the window, but I couldn't move. My own voice kept spilling through, steady, confident, like a version of me I didn't recognize. "You're one of us now," it said. I pressed the mic to my mouth, desperation leaking through. "One of who? What are you talking about?" There was a long pause. "Just static. For a moment I thought maybe it was over. But then, underneath the hiss, I heard something else. Breathing. Not mine. Not from the cab. But through the radio itself. Slow, steady inhales. Like someone was sitting right there on the other end, listening. And then my voice came back. Softer. You'll get used to it. That broke me. I tossed the mic onto the seat, slammed my palm against the dash. My nerves were screaming, my body telling me to get out of the cruiser, to run into the desert if I had to. Anything to get away from that sound. But before I could, the radio clicked again. This time it wasn't just one voice, it was two. The first was mine. Clear, calm, like I'd been sitting there the whole time waiting for my cue, and the second was also mine. But it wasn't live. It was me, answering back. Not just the same tone, my exact words. From moments earlier, the things I'd actually said repeated back at me. This is Deputy Alvarez. Who is this? The sound of my own voice, echoing back in the exact cadence, the exact rhythm. I felt the blood drain from my face. They had recorded me. Not just my voice, but me. The two voices overlapped, one leading, one repeating. Then, like a sick duet, they started to speak together. You're doing fine. Always steady. You don't quit. I slammed the radio off, yanked the whole unit from the dash, and nearly ripped the wires free. The static cut. The voices stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. The desert around me pressed in. My headlights stretched too far, spilling across sand that seemed endless. My hands shook against the wheel, sweat dripping down my arms, and then, from the dead speakers, a whisper. You can't turn it off, I gasped, jerking back like the dash had burned me. The voice was faint, but it carried more weight than any shout. You've already filled the shift. My vision blurred, panic clawing through me. I had to stop. I had to breathe. I steered hard onto the shoulder and braked, dust curling up around the cruiser as it groaned to a halt. For a long time, I just sat there, forehead pressed to the wheel, trying to steady myself. But then I noticed something. The CB mic wasn't on the seat anymore. I hadn't touched it since I dropped it. I was sure of that. But now it was hanging neatly on the hook, right where it should be. I stared at it, my chest rising and falling like I'd run a mile. My hand twitched, wanting to reach for it, but every nerve in me screamed not to. And yet, it crackled anyway. The speaker hissed alive, steady, patient. Then my voice came through one last time. Copy that. Beginning patrol. I froze, because I hadn't said those words. Not yet. But as the silence closed in again, I realized what the voice had meant. I wasn't chasing anyone. I wasn't being tested. I was already part of it. And somewhere on some stretch of road I hadn't reached yet, I was already answering back.